I've heard so many good things about hope already this morning that it's like, I don't need to do a sermon. Let's go straight to communion. Because I've been in a quandary this week. I wrote what I wanted to say like 3 weeks ago, which is unusual to do it that early, but I knew how busy I was going to be. And so I pulled it out middle of this week, and I'm going, yeah, I don't know. So I may be switching courses here in the middle of these my sermon, so bear with me if I do that. Anyway, it starts with, hi, everybody. Welcome to all those in the room and those on Zoom. I'd like to read Matthew chapter 1 for today's sermon. Does anybody know what Matthew chapter 1 is? The genealogy of Jesus. If I started reading that, you'd all be asleep in just a few minutes. But I will point out the summary from verse 17 that says, it was 14 generations between Abraham and David. And from David to the exile in Babylon was another 14 generations. And then from the exile to the Messiah being born was another 14 generations. So it's like, that's a lot to keep track of, and I'm sure during part of that time it was just oral histories. But I think I can go back to my great-grandparents, maybe my great-great, if I count them right, and I calculated that it would only take me 39 more greats to get to 42. So, with all those people on your family tree, somebody was probably a screw-up. we saw that in the video, which I just chuckle every time I watch that video. It's like, and that is actually our theme today. We ran with a few different themes for Advent, and it was finding God among the screw-ups. So this morning I focused on, and all that, on David's family tree because Jesus was of the house of lineage of David. So it's really Jesus's family tree. We put up the tree this morning and put on it the ornaments that you guys made in the last intergenerational Sunday. And while it's still fall over here with the leaves falling, it works. So your families are represented on the tree over here on my left. And okay, there's the tree, there's that. Okay, I'm picking on David this morning, like I said. And if you don't know the whole story of David, there's lots to read about David. And on his resume, he had slaying Goliath and authoring many of the Psalms and being the king that conquered Jerusalem and bringing the Ark of the Covenant. He's just got a lot going on. And I watched a 13-minute video on David. I couldn't pare it down to show you, but I think I'll show it to my Sunday school class in January because it was pretty interesting. About the 8-minute mark, after Saul, King Saul, was the king before David, after that king tried to quit killing David and putting his own son on the throne, and the Philistines were all mixed in there, and it was really crazy. But David winds up being on the throne because the King Saul and his son, who happened to be David's best friend, they were killed by the Philistines. And then David unites the rest of the tribes by having a wife from each tribe. How convenient. But we won't judge on that because it was a different time and a different way of doing things. And so David already had many wives, but even with that, here comes the screw up. He couldn't get away from seeing the beautiful Bathsheba when she was bathing on the rooftop that he could see from his palace. So he summons Bathsheba to the palace, and as I think Alicia pointed out in one of her sermons, you really can't say no to the king. Even if she didn't want to go to the palace, she was going to have to go there. And so against her will, she winds up pregnant with David's child. So David, then trying to cover it up, this is his generals, one of his generals, or his best general, that's Bathsheba's is his wife. And so he calls the general home from the war and says, why don't you go home and, take a nice bath and be with your wife, and maybe we'll get by without announcing whose baby this is. But the general is so loyal that he sleeps at the palace gates and never goes home to be with Bathsheba. So I'm telling you, the whole episode goes down as a screw-up. God was very displeased with David. The infant son that Bathsheba bore, God took that son from them. The infant son died. And in the end, David repented and God forgave him. And the next king is Solomon when David eventually dies. But like I said, that family tree, that was Jesus's family tree. So I'm sure somewhere on your personal family tree you can find something. I know there was some screw up on my family tree when I was younger, and I won't know names. I heard the adults whispering. I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what was going on until much later into adulthood, when I finally said, so what was all that about? And it was like, oh, this is, it's like, oh my gosh. So that was that, and I think Jim Cummings, who was from his hometown in Wellston, I think he can tell you that my grandfather and his brothers came into town on Saturday night to live it up and get in fights and all that. So who knows what happened in there. And I know that I have screwed up as well. And God is still leading me through my screw-ups. And so I'm trying to listen to him this morning when he tells me that I need to share this story from Carlo Carretto, who lived from 1910 to 1988. And he worked in northern Africa among the poor for a group called the Little Brothers of Jesus. And I'm going to read to you from one of my daily meditations about Carlo Carretto. When he was 44 years old, so, midlife, he heard the call upon his life to go towards this contemplative life, we'll call it, and go over and serve in the deserts. He was from Italy. And he said he experienced the call very deeply, a depth which only faith can provide, and where darkness is absolute, where human strength can no longer help. And he had to say yes without understanding a thing about what he was saying yes to, but you're compelled, like Bathsheba was compelled to go to the palace, we are compelled to answer sometimes the calls we hear. Now, I heard my call when I was 20 years old, and I immediately turned and ran the other way until I was in my 40s, actually. So I can relate to this guy. But he heard, "Leave everything and come with me into the desert. It is not your acts and deeds that I want your prayer and your love. Come with me into the desert." There's something much greater than human action sometimes, and that is prayer. And we talked about that this morning a little bit in the 9:30 service when we were talking about miracles that we have personally, miracles that have happened in our own lives. So he went into the desert. Passing through a desert village on his way to a time of solitude, Coretto met a man named Kada, K-A-D-A, who needed a blanket. Although Coretto had two, he did not share. The next night, Coretto dreamed that he was penned under a boulder, unable to move, and he said it was a terrible feeling that felt like purgatory. "You will be judged according to your ability to love in this place." And my eyes, burnt by the sun, gaze up into a cloudless sky. He said he didn't want to deceive himself anymore and that he was not able to. The truth is that he could have given his second blanket to the man that needed it. And he said, "But I love my own skin more than my brother's." He feared the cold desert night, and that's why he could not share. And we touched on that a little bit this morning too, the fear. It's usually a fear of something that keeps us from going into that action mode. And he said as time went on, because that was really when he was first coming, as time went on, he said his personal purgatory was that memory of not giving the blanket, because he was resisting the transformation and he was saying no to love. "You will be judged according to your ability to love," says the great stone under which I spent my purgatory, waiting for perfect love to grow within myself, that which Jesus brought to earth for me. So I guess my message to you this morning is that when we come to the communion table, we need to confess what our fears are, what keeps us away from God. He doesn't want you to feel wrapped in shame. And he doesn't want you to feel like a screw-up. There's no shame in asking for forgiveness. Move on from the past and move forward without fear. Pray. We've been learning this in our Monday night kind of women's Bible study. We have been learning about prayer and learning how to pray. And you need to pray with adoration. We always talk about adoring the baby Jesus. Come, let us adore him. We're not adoring him because he's a cute baby in the manger. We're adoring him because he is worthy alone of that adoration. As we move on from the past, ask what it is that he would have you do. Let's celebrate this season of Jesus' birthday with truly grateful hearts and an attitude of hope. Hope for the future of our congregation, hope for the future of the nation and the world. And bring your gifts to the manger. God will multiply them and work miracles with them if you will just let him.